welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about how the revolution starts within, which is again, connected to all the mindfulness, consciousness related topics that I talk about. And what this is really putting emphasis on is upon how individual changes to the way we see the world, the way we think about the world, and experience the world is fundamental to eventually changing the world, to creating sort of positive intentional action. And you know something, it's often understated how a lot of what we see in the world is a function of the way in which we see it. And what I mean by this essentially is that if you see the world in terms of threat, in terms of danger, in terms of very much your stress response, you're going to be more attentionally predisposed to perceiving real threats, to essentially filtering out all the good that's in the world and putting complete emphasis on what is bad and what is dangerous. And of course, there will always be dangerous things, threats in the world, which we need to address. But often we can have our sort of behavior and our being sort of paralyzed by the stress response when it is sort of manipulated against us, which I feel it is. When you look at most mainstream media channels, they will tend to have a very strong negativity bias, a very strong emphasis on all the shit that's going on in the world, and this keeps you paralyzed and keeps you vicariously experiencing all the trauma that is going on in the world. And it's, sometimes seeing all this stuff can inspire a real sort of righteous indignation, a real righteous anger, and a desire to change the world. But it can also make us neurotic and unstable and unbalanced, so that like when we do try to change the world, if we're changing it from this very stressed and anxious state, we don't create the right sort of changes, to really act against evil and against the dangers in the world. You need to retain a sense of balance, a sense of emotional equanimity, and a certain level of detachment, so that you're not going to make rash and irrational choices. And therefore, if you want to inspire positive change in the world and the external, you do need to work on your internal. You do need to work on your emotional balance, your ability to weather distress, discomfort, because these things will arise in your life. They will challenge you. And, it's, they are they are the training that is necessary for you to sort of develop competence, develop confidence in yourself. The life of a person who's forever comfortable is someone who's atrophied and has never really truly challenged by the world. And, I think if we are properly aligned in ourselves and in the world, then you will sort of have a sort of innate disposition to wanting to have a meaningful engagement in the world, to wanting to create, genuine value and, care for the people in your immediate surroundings, for the people you work with. You want to feel connected in a meaningful way. You don't want to just go about life just working narrowly for yourself. I think that's a very, solipsistic and lonely way to live in the world. Humans, we're sort of naturally sort of tribal and communal kind of beings. We want to feel embedded in a meaningful network, in a meaningful kind of group that is oriented towards something good, something positive, towards truth and justice and whatnot. And And this sort of groupish nature of us to want to feel connected to something larger than ourselves, it can often get manipulated and exploited by totalitarian regimes, by organizations which are not really oriented towards good things, um, but they're more than willing to bullshit the individuals within that group to convince them that they are you know oriented towards truth and justice. You can just think of all the bullshit wars that are fought and funded by um, corrupt bankers, who or by or geopolitical leverage over whatever oil is here, and they will convince soldiers that this fighting war is a positive thing in this context, when you know if these soldiers had a sort of sense of self-reflection, they started to question, why am I going to this place to fight in this war and kill these people? If they step back and to sort of analyze the cause that they are fighting for, they may have certain reservations. And this speaks to the importance of having really philosophically informed warriors and truth seekers and leaders within the world. It does seem that the leaders of the world right now, of governments and states and large scale um, multinational bureaucracies, it's dubious to what extent they are really oriented towards the the expansion of consciousness, the raising of people's well-being and vibrations. It does seem that they would rather rule through instilling fear and confusion within the populace, through keeping us divided against each other, keeping us confused, fearful. And when we are confused and fearful, we narrow our consciousness, focusing only on our self-interest, on our immediate surroundings, and we ignore each other, we ignore the rest of the world, we ignore all the other things that are valuable. Because a person in a state of fear and stress, a state of affliction, they cannot attend to anything other than the pains that they are experiencing and worrying about right now. And that truly separates them away from the rest of the world in a very damaging kind of way. And a lot of the things that I think about is, how do you overcome this? This fear that takes you into a state of separation, that takes you into a state where your ego defenses are flared up and you're disconnected from the rest of the world and other people, and your attention is just so fixated on yourself in a sort of negative kind of way. And you know it really does hinder your ability to meaningfully engage in the world, to create meaningful action, which I think is a very important thing. And I guess to come back to the overall theme of this little video that I'm doing is really paying attention to the link between our thoughts and our attention and our actions, between our minds, the internal states of affairs, and the external manifestations of um, those mental things in our actions and what we do in the world. Because there is an obvious connection, and it's interesting to think about how, when our minds are overly fixated on all the negative, overly fixated on the stress, on the fear, and on the worry, how does that really negative mental state, how does that bleed into your actions? Does it really prepare you to be able to really care about yourself, about other people? You know, Because I think, there are obviously very valid reasons to be concerned about the goings on in the world. But I don't think that looking at the going ons in the world and then being paralyzed by fear is a reasonable response. Or it's not. I don't think it's a, well, maybe it is a reasonable response to an extent, but it's not optimal for then acting in the world. And it's a difficult thing to really to navigate because you want to care, but a certain detachment is simply necessary in order to not become totally overwhelmed. You know, you need to be really conscious of all the things in your mental bubble, I suppose. And you shouldn't take on more than you can cope with, because us humans, we're not really designed to take on all the suffering of the world that is often filtering through our social media feeds. We should be aware about, but we should definitely prioritize our own mental well-being first and foremost, because like I said, when we are paralyzed, we can't act in the world, we can't inspire positive change. And when you are in this state of total fear, anxiety, and worry, others around you can sense it, you know, and you start to lose sight of, being a real positive and nurturing and caring influence for those around you when you are caught up within your own heads, caught up within these things. So you shouldn't ignore them, but you should integrate them, understand them, and not take on more than you can carry in the moment. But yeah, I hope that's been interesting.